Let me now just share with you some information where at the end of our symposium, where Ceva does stand in respiratory health monitoring and the control of respiratory infections. Um, First of all, I would like to start with some overview uh, about the European, let's call it, level of respiratory health based on the survey that we made using Ceva program, which is evaluating the EP, pneumonia-like, and AP, actinobacillus pneumonia-like lesions based on the described methodology already a couple of years ago. And so we did this survey in 2017, so basically in the 12 months period from the end of 16 up to November 17. In this period, we evaluated almost 3,000 batches of slaughter pigs. In total, it included 325,000 lungs, so quite a high number of items that we evaluated. So what we have seen in terms of EP-like lesions, the median values, which are presented in this table, and then the variation, so the quartile 1 and 3, showing the distribution of the values in this population. So we've seen the prevalence about 41% of lungs having some extension of the EP-like lesions, which was actually quite consistent with also the previous results from 2016, slightly lower. In 2016, the prevalence was about 50%. Here it showed 40%. So what does it tell us? Basically, the number of evaluated lungs almost doubled. So in the much larger number of evaluated lungs, we've seen quite similar results. So first of all, it shows that this methodology is quite relevant because also many more people did this lung scoring. Secondly, it shows that maybe slightly really the prevalence of the lungs with EP-like lesions diminished. And it's quite consistent also with some other studies published last year done by the researchers from Italy and in Germany, where also about close to 50% of the lungs were affected. The extension was, as you see here, about 5% of lungs on average. The median value, 5% of the parenchyma was affected by this ventrocranial consolidation. In terms of the AP-like lesions, the prevalence was about 10%, which was also, and in this case, very, very similar to the results in 2016, where it was also about 10%. So here the results are quite stable. We don't see any improvement, and the API index expressing the prevalence and the extension of the lesions was on average, or the median value, 0.26. So this also gives you the idea where do you stand if you are asking yourself, if I'm doing the slaughter check and the lung lesion evaluation, if I have the API index 0.2, what does it mean? Is it a lot? Is it a little? So here we have some European average values and the distribution, so you can also benchmark yourself in comparison to the usual or high or low values found in different, and it was really made in all major European countries, major in terms of the swine production. Then some local studies, local means in different countries, showed and evaluated also some factors contributing to various regional distribution or even a seasonal distribution. So what we have seen, and you will see for your interest, the poster will be displayed during the conference. We have seen the results from Germany and Austria, showing the different distribution of EP or AP-like lesions in different regions in Germany and Austria. So here, those blue bars are expressing the results in Austria. This is the Northwest Germany, South Germany, and Eastern Germany. And so the interpretation was that, for example, for EP-like lesions expressed here by EP index, um, the situation in Austria and some regions in Germany is quite similar, except Eastern Germany, where the typical farm is a huge farm, quite isolated. So the density of the farm is relatively low in Eastern Germany, and that might be the reason why the prevalence and the issue with mycoplasma infections might be relatively lower to the other regions. While in case of the EP-like lesions, we see relatively lower incidence and severity in Austria compared to any of the German regions. And the explanation here was that in Germany, the swine producers raised a lot of pigs purchased as weaners or post-weaners from Netherlands and Denmark. And here, so the epidemiology is really reflecting the mix of sources from different origin, and maybe also that's the reason for the higher incidence of actinobacillus, higher prevalence of actinobacillus infections in this country compared to Austria. Another study looking at another factor was made in Spain, and here they looked into the seasonal factor, and quite interestingly, it was found that all the year round the results were quite similar, except the period between July-September. This is the period of the slaughter of the pigs. So those pigs were born from, let's say, January to March. So those pigs born and raised in winter, spring had more problems with particularly enzootic pneumonia, but also slightly with, I mean, the prevalence and the extension of the EP-like lesions, while for actinobacillus infections, the difference were not really expressing any relation with the seasonality. So this is just to summarize the value of the results from the lung scoring that can give us the picture of the actual situation, and we can really evaluate also some influence of different factors, regional, seasonal, etc. So now I will focus a little bit more on those three pathogens. Why? First of all, and it was mentioned already previously, mycoplasma not only is the primary pathogen, one of the major pathogens responsible for the PRDC, but also it contributes and really can make much more severe the different co-infections. And there were numerous publications on that, and quite one of those showing the deterioration of the course of actinobacillus infection when it came after previous mycoplasma challenge. And very recently, there were two other papers published on the influence of mycoplasma on PRRS infection, where it was even said that without mycoplasma control, we are not able to successfully control PRRS infection. And very recently, there was a nice study describing the even in vitro effect of mycoplasma on the replication of PCV2. And mycoplasma bacterium enhanced the replication of PCV2, and even interestingly, not all the strains of mycoplasma enhance this replication equally. So there's also something related to the mycoplasma strain itself. Then second pathogen that I will talk about is actinobacillus. Why? Again, it's the primary pathogen, very important. We have seen also in the first presentation that we can experience some new discoveries in terms of the serotype diversity. There were 3 new serotypes recently described, 16 and then potentially 17 and 18. So it's also the bacterium where we can see the non-stable situation in the properties of the bacteria. And in the course of the reduction of the use of antimicrobials, in some countries we really see much higher challenges due to Actinobacillus once the total volume of the antibiotics is used in swine industry. So this is another important challenge. And then lastly, PCV2, again, as the primary pathogen, and really not affecting only the lungs itself for the syndrome of the PCV2 lung disease, but also contributing to the other co-infections as a very important immunosuppressive agent. And so I also have chosen logically those pathogens, not only of the importance, but also because Ceva can offer you the solutions. So firstly, I will talk a little bit about Hygen, the Mycoplasma vaccine, which was mentioned already twice today. And those of you who attended last year's symposium are familiar with some results that we presented last year. So I will just show you some few results of the recent studies that we have made particularly in Europe. What usually we do see once Hygen is implemented in a farm is a picture like this, representing the really long-lasting improvements in the respiratory health. Here it's expressed by the numbers or percentage of healthy lungs, which are showing those bars, and the MADEC index, which is represented by, so reflecting the extension of the lesions, represented by this line. So here, this is on the results of the consecutive batches on the previously non-vaccinated farm. After the implementation with Hygen, you see the significant reduction and very stable situation in terms of the prevalence. So all those bars are representing the healthy lungs and the significant decrease of the extension. This study was looking at the similar patterns, the similar indicators. So again, the prevalence of the healthy lungs and the EP index on the farm where the vaccine was switched from one to another for Hygen. And here again, you see the significant decrease and very stable improvements in terms of the prevalence of lung lesions and their severity. So those are quite typical pictures where what we can see and what we can achieve when we monitor really the consecutive batches after vaccination with Hygen. Last year we presented a couple of studies documenting the comparison between typically single shot, one shot vaccines compared to Hygen. Of course, there are different approaches, different vaccination strategies, and so we were also interested in how Hygen performs in comparison to different vaccination protocols. And there are some countries such as Ireland, Italy, Belgium, where still a lot of farmers are using two-shot vaccination programs, two-shot vaccines. So we were also interested in how Hygen performs in comparison to double-shot programs. So that was the trial, and also it will be published now and displayed as a poster during the conference. Trial made in Italy, when Hygen vaccinated pigs were compared to pigs vaccinated with a two-shot vaccine at 1 and 3 weeks of age. And in total, it was almost 1,200 pigs vaccinated with Hygen compared to 100 pigs previously, different batches vaccinated with, with this two-shot program. So we have seen the significant reduction in the EP index in favor of the Hygen vaccinated pigs, and in quite nice correlation to the improvement of this respiratory health, we have seen the increase of the growth performance, which finally resulted in about 70 grams plus on average per pig, which was in this case not statistically significant due to the high variation among the batches. But anyway, when we calculated the economic profit, it was, I would say, very pleasant for euros per pig. In Italy also, and particularly in Italy, where the pigs are raised until the high age, about 9 months, some of the farmers are practicing the boosting with the Mycoplasma vaccine even in the higher age. So in this case, we had about almost 6,000 pigs vaccinated with Hygen, compared to another protocol using Mycoplasma vaccination at 3 weeks and then about at 5 months. And here you see that the total loss, which was the indicator measured at this farm, reduced significantly in the Hygen vaccinated pigs, and also the total medication cost was, in this case, significantly reduced in the Hygen vaccinated batches. And quite similarly, we had the calculated economic profit, including mortality, all the runs which had to be sold outside, and the medication, reduced medication cost. The total benefit was per pig about 4 euros. We've been discussing previously also the tendency to use combinations of Mycoplasma and PCV2 vaccines. And some of the vaccines are on the market already. So in Spain, one study was made comparing Hygen versus this PCV MHIO commercial combined product. And so the indicators were measured, again, measuring the lung health and the growth performance. So in terms of the respiratory health in slaughter pigs, what they have seen, the percentage of the lungs affected with the EP-like lesions was lower in Hygen vaccinated pigs compared to this combo product, and also the extension of the lesions was lower. Both indicators, there was no statistically significant difference. However, in terms of the production parameters, the feed efficiency and the weight gain, those differences were statistically significant. And here in this case, the total overall financial profit measured for those pigs amounted about 2.5 euros per pig. So there was just few of the results comparing Hygen with different, I would say, alternative vaccination protocols. Now, in 2 countries, Spain and Germany, they did also a comparing of the lung lesion scores, so the indicators of the respiratory health in the slaughter pigs, where they compared the batches vaccinated with Hygen compared to other vaccines. So on this really large-scale evaluation made in 2017, in this first case in Spain, it was about 8,000 lungs in total. And they compared, again, the Hygen vaccinated batches to any other vaccines. And they have found the significant difference between Hygen and the others in favor of Hygen, and in terms of the prevalence of the EP-like lesions, as well as the extension of those lesions. In Germany, on roughly 15,500 lungs originated from 150 batches. They compared Hygen with, and they even named, identified the other vaccines. So in comparison to those three, Hygen vaccinated batches had the relatively lowest EP index, expressing both prevalence and the extension of the lesion. So just to conclude that in those countries, actually major pig producing countries in Europe, Hygen in this large scale evaluation really performed better than the other commercially available vaccines on the market. Now, just a couple of words about Coglapix, the Actinobacillus pneumoniae vaccine. Again, last year we presented some of the results from the experimental challenge studies, and this is just the summary of 3 trials that we recently made where Coglapix was compared to those commercial products you see, Porcellus APP, Suvac, Inglevac, Biosuis, Pneumosin, and Pleurovac, which some of them are toxoid vaccines such as Porcellus, Suvac, and Biosuis, and the others are bacterin. So we had a mixture of toxoid or bacterin vaccines, and we did the challenge typically in pigs vaccinated at 6 or 7 and boosted at 9 or 10 weeks of age, and then challenged about 4 weeks later. And so we did the challenge with either serotype 2 or serotype 4, which was important particularly for Spain, and serotype 6, which is quite recently becoming more and more important, particularly in the northern European countries, Denmark, Germany, I would say mainly. So what we have seen, first of all, the AP2 challenge. This is the cumulative clinical score day by day. So just really, you see on the bars the sum of the clinical scores day by day between day 1 to day 7. And you see that the lowest score was in the Coglapix vaccinated pigs. The lung lesions were the lowest in the Coglapix, followed by Inglevac, Biosuis, and then higher with Porcellus, Pneumosin, and Pleurosuvac. In terms of the AP4 challenge, the picture was quite similar. The lowest lesion score was found in Coglapix, then followed by Porcellus and Suvac APP, and the others then followed further. And in terms of AP6 challenge, very similar results were achieved in Coglapix and Porcellus, and then followed by Inglevac, Suvac, Biosuis, and Pneumosin. So when we just really like purely mechanically added different scores, and of course there were like 3 different challenge experiments, but just mathematically, when we sum up the scores, which were the average scores in each of those challenges, we see basically this picture. So knowing that we have typically more serotypes circulating in the farm, so usually we have multi-serotype infections in the farm, and so this serotype-independent protection is very important, serotype cross-protection. So in this case, if we just make a little modelization of the efficiency of Coglapix phase to different serotypes, we see really very nice performance. And now the last section will be dedicated to Circovac, which is the PCV2 vaccine. And here I would focus on specifically the efficiency against one genotype, which is now apparently most important in terms of prevalence and maybe even clinical relevance. So just as an introduction, we know that there are several genotypes of the PCV virus circulating in the field, and most recently PCV2D from 2014-15 appeared in the swine herds, and quite interestingly, this is the study published in well, last year by people from Munich University, showing that still PCV2A is most prevalent in the study where the random selection of the farm was examined. However, when we look at the problematic farms, then PCV2D seems to be most prevalent where the clinical problems reported are. Independently, is it in Europe? Is it in Southeast Asia? Is it in the US? And also, I would like to kind of introduce the studies of the results of the very recent study, which will be published here by Dr. Mieli at the ESPHM, showing the survey made in France on almost 40 farms, where more than 30 different strains were described, and here the most prevalent was also PCV2D genotype. And also for PCV2D compared to PCV2B, the average clinical score was higher in those PCV2D affected farms. And also some indicators related to the losses in terms of the growth rate, wasting, mortality, etc., were higher in the PCV2D affected farms. So we know that from the experiments there is, or maybe that the information are sometimes controversial in different publications. There are papers showing that independently on the genotypes, we can see or not the clinical expression. So there is no real clinical relevance or differences in the virulence among different genotypes. But in the field condition, we see that most problems are due to PCV2D. So that's just as the introduction to the next slides, because we were also interested in, of course, how Circovac is protecting pigs against this challenge with a PCV2 strain belonging to PCV2D genotype. So basically, this is the outline of the trial. Pigs were vaccinated with Circovac at 3 weeks of age, and we compared also with another vaccine using the same, of course, genotype, PCV2A. And they were challenged with the isolate characterized as a PCV2D, and then 4 weeks later they were sacrificed, and viremia and shedding and the amount of the virus in the lymphoid tissue was measured. So what we have seen, first of all, is the seroconversion. So the neutralizing antibodies were measured in those 3 groups of pigs after the vaccination. So that was the time of challenge, so before the infection and after the challenge. So you see that the Circovac was very similar pattern, level of production of the neutralizing antibodies as this vaccine, and of course significantly higher than the control pigs. When we look at the viremia, we have seen the faster decrease of viremia below the, I would say, high levels. So when we take the cutoff of CT33, which corresponds about 6 logs per milliliter, we have the fastest reduction in the Circovac vaccinated pigs. Okay, so we can say that those pigs really had the faster decrease of the viral load below this, let's say, maybe even clinically important level. When we look at the total volume on day 28, we have the statistically significant lower level in the Circovac vaccinated pigs compared to both Circoflex or the non-vaccinated control. So here we can really demonstrate that Circovac is basically efficient against PCV2D. So let me just conclude those thoughts in my presentation. The prevalence of the respiratory diseases and consequently the prevalence of the lesions in the slaughter pigs still remains high, yet for especially EP-like lesions, we can see some decrease maybe in time. So in next year, we will see if this is a real tendency. MHIO stays still in the center of the syndrome, and we have the high efficient tool how to prevent the disease and the affection of the lung parenchyma. And so basically those vaccines that we were discussed now, Hygen, Coglapix, and Circovac, can really help you to deal with those major respiratory infections that we mentioned here.